It began with a portrait that never appeared. Palace aides expected Queen Camilla to stand beside the future of the monarchy as always, yet when the final draft emerged, her place was gone. In its place stood Catherine alone. What seemed like a routine update quickly became the center of a royal storm, one that insiders claim had been building behind palace walls for months. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. At first, very few people understood the significance of what had happened. Official portraits within the royal family are rarely just photographs. They are statements. They reveal priorities, alliances, and sometimes even the future direction of the crown itself. That is why whispers began circulating almost immediately among palace staff, royal commentators, and longtime observers of the monarchy. Something had changed. Not publicly, not officially, but quietly behind closed doors, a decision had been made that many believed would send shockwaves through royal circles. According to reports from palace insiders, discussions surrounding a new official portrait had been taking place for weeks. These conversations were said to involve senior aides, communications advisors, and members of the household responsible for managing the public image of the monarchy. Normally, such preparations attract little attention. Yet this time was different. Staff reportedly noticed an unusual level of secrecy surrounding the project. Meetings were held behind tightly guarded doors. Drafts were reviewed repeatedly. Even trusted aides were allegedly excluded from parts of the process. The deeper they looked, the more questions emerged. At the center of those questions stood Prince William. As heir to the throne, his influence had been steadily growing. Over recent years, he had assumed greater responsibilities, represented the crown on increasingly important occasions, and begun shaping the image of the monarchy that would eventually become his own. Sources claim that William had been carefully reviewing how the institution should present itself moving forward. The issue was not simply about tradition. It was about the future. It was about deciding which figures would carry the monarchy through the next generation and which roles would gradually become less central as time moved on. For Queen Camilla, many expected her position within any major royal portrait to remain secure. After all, she was the queen. Her place beside King Charles had become a familiar part of the royal landscape. Yet palace observers reportedly began noticing subtle changes during the planning stages. Certain assumptions that once seemed unquestionable were suddenly being reconsidered. Certain expectations no longer appeared guaranteed. While no public explanation emerged, the silence itself seemed to fuel growing speculation. Why were preparations changing? Why were discussions becoming increasingly sensitive? And why did so many insiders seem reluctant to speak openly about what was taking place? At the same time, Catherine's role within the monarchy continued to expand. The Princess of Wales had spent years building a reputation based on dedication, patience, and careful service. Public support for her remained remarkably strong, and each new responsibility appeared to reinforce her standing. What once looked like gradual preparation for a future role now seemed to be accelerating. Royal watchers noted her growing visibility, her increasing importance during key engagements, and the confidence that palace officials appeared to place in her. Some even began suggesting that the institution was already preparing the public for a new era, one centered around William and Catherine as the future face of the monarchy. Then came the rumors. At first, they spread quietly through media circles and among royal correspondents. Soon they became impossible to ignore. Whispers suggested that a significant shift in the royal hierarchy was underway. Not an official change in titles. Not a constitutional transformation. Something more symbolic, yet potentially just as powerful. The alleged removal of Camilla from a prominent position, and Catherine's emergence as the sole representative in a key royal image became the focus of intense debate. Every detail was examined. Every silence was interpreted. Every unexplained decision added another layer of mystery. What made the situation even more explosive was the question at its heart: who truly represents the future of the monarchy? For years, that answer appeared straightforward. Yet now, according to growing speculation, The palace itself seemed to be sending a different message. Whether intentional or not, the portrait controversy had evolved into something much larger than a discussion about imagery. It had become a conversation about influence, succession, legacy, and the direction the crown intended to take in the years ahead. And as more pieces of the puzzle slowly emerged, it became clear that this story was not beginning with the portrait at all. But the portrait itself was only the surface of a much deeper struggle that had been quietly unfolding for years. When the updated portrait finally circulated among senior palace officials, reactions were immediate. Some saw a simple artistic decision. Others saw something far more significant, a symbolic removal that carried consequences far beyond a single photograph. The whispers that had begun quietly behind palace walls suddenly gained momentum. What had once been dismissed as routine speculation now carried a sense of urgency. For those who understood the language of the monarchy, portraits were never merely decorative. They were carefully crafted statements about power, influence, and the future direction of the crown. Every position, every inclusion, and every absence carried meaning. That was why the updated portrait sparked such intense discussion among senior figures who knew that symbolism often speaks louder than any official announcement ever could. Throughout royal history, portraits have served as silent records of changing eras. Long before formal statements and carefully managed communications became standard practice, the monarchy relied on symbolism to project stability, authority, and continuity. Generations of royals understood that where an individual stood within an official image, often reflected where they stood within the institution itself. This was not written in law, yet it was understood by everyone who operated within royal circles. The public might see a family image, but insiders often saw something entirely different, a carefully arranged message about the balance of power. That understanding was what made the latest development so explosive. For years, Queen Camilla had occupied a prominent place in royal imagery. Following her rise to queen consort and later queen, her presence became closely associated with King Charles and the senior leadership of the monarchy. Her appearances in official materials reinforced her position within the institution. Many assumed that arrangement would continue indefinitely. Yet, the updated portrait seemed to challenge those assumptions. The absence that had captured so much attention was not merely about who appeared in the image. It was about what that absence might suggest. At the same time, Catherine's standing continued to grow stronger. Her popularity had expanded steadily over the years, not through dramatic gestures, but through consistency, discipline, and careful dedication to royal duty. Public trust in her remained remarkably high, and many viewed her as a stabilizing figure during a period of uncertainty for the monarchy. As responsibilities increased, so did her influence. Every appearance, every initiative, and every major engagement seemed to reinforce the perception that she was becoming one of the institution's most important assets. The portrait appeared to reflect that growing reality in a way that could no longer be ignored. Behind closed doors, discussions reportedly became increasingly intense. Senior aides and advisors were said to be examining not only the portrait itself, but the message it would send to the public. Questions emerged about representation, continuity, and the future image of the crown. Some believed the monarchy was entering a transitional period that required a stronger focus on the next generation. Others reportedly worried about how such changes would be interpreted by those who had spent years securing their positions within the royal structure. Every conversation seemed to lead back to the same question: who should embody the future of the monarchy in the eyes of the public? As speculation intensified, one theory began dominating palace gossip. According to numerous royal observers, many believed Prince William had personally approved the changes. No official confirmation emerged, but that did little to slow the rumors. In fact, the lack of clarification only seemed to deepen the mystery. William's growing authority, combined with his increasing role in shaping the future of the institution, made the theory appear plausible to many insiders. If true, it would represent more than a simple approval of a portrait. It would signal a deliberate decision about the monarchy's future identity. The more palace insiders analyzed the situation, the more they viewed the portrait as a message rather than a mistake. Some interpreted it as a declaration that the next era had already begun. Others saw it as evidence of shifting priorities within the royal household. Whatever the truth, one fact became impossible to ignore. The conversation was no longer centered on the portrait itself. Attention was moving toward the person many believed had orchestrated the change. And as questions multiplied, the focus of the entire controversy began to settle on a single figure whose influence seemed to be growing with every passing day. As debate intensified, attention shifted toward the person believed to have made the final decision. For years, William carefully balanced loyalty, diplomacy, and duty. But according to royal watchers, this moment felt different. The future king appeared ready to draw a line that would reshape perceptions of the monarchy itself. The speculation surrounding the portrait had already captured public attention. But as conversations deepened, focus began shifting toward the man many believed stood behind the decision. Prince William had spent much of his adult life navigating one of the most difficult positions in the world. He was expected to honor tradition while preparing for change. He was expected to support the existing monarchy while quietly preparing to lead the next one. For years, he managed that delicate balance with remarkable discipline. Yet, many observers now believed they were witnessing a turning point, one where patience was giving way to purpose. The portrait controversy did not emerge in isolation. It arrived during a period when William's influence within royal operations appeared stronger than ever. As King Charles continued facing the challenges that came with age and responsibility, the heir to the throne found himself carrying a larger share of the monarchy's public burden. With every passing year, more duties flowed toward him. More decisions required his input. More attention centered on how he would eventually shape the institution he was destined to inherit. Those pressures did not weaken him. According to many royal commentators, they strengthened him. What made this particular moment so significant was the growing belief that William was no longer simply preparing for kingship. He was beginning to define what that future kingship would look like. Reports suggested he had become increasingly focused on presenting a modern vision of the monarchy, one that emphasized stability, relevance, and a clear sense of direction. This was not about abandoning tradition. It was about deciding which traditions would carry the institution forward and which practices belonged to a different era. Such decisions were never easy. Every adjustment created winners and losers. Every shift in emphasis carried consequences. At the center of that evolving strategy stood the Wales family. For years, William and Catherine had gradually become the most recognizable symbols of the monarchy's future. Public support remained consistently strong, and many people viewed them as representing continuity during uncertain times. As that support grew, so did efforts to strengthen their position within the royal structure. Palace insiders reportedly believed that the future king understood the importance of presenting a united vision for the years ahead. The monarchy could not rely solely on its history. It needed confidence in its future. Increasingly, William and Catherine seemed to embody that future. Perhaps most striking was the change many observers noticed in William himself. The cautious young prince who once avoided controversy appeared to be evolving into a far more decisive figure. Confidence that had been built through years of experience was becoming visible in the choices attributed to him. Decisions that might once have been delayed now seemed to move forward with greater certainty. Advisors reportedly recognized a leader becoming increasingly comfortable with authority. That confidence was admired by supporters, but viewed with concern by those who feared losing influence in a changing royal landscape. Rumors also suggested that William wanted greater clarity regarding succession and representation. Not because the line of succession was uncertain, but because public understanding of the monarchy's future mattered deeply. Confusion created instability. Clarity created confidence. Many believed the portrait controversy reflected an effort to make that future easier to understand. Whether those interpretations were accurate remained unknown, yet they continued spreading through royal circles with remarkable speed. Outside palace walls, reactions became increasingly intense. Supporters praised what they viewed as strong leadership and a willingness to prepare the institution for the next chapter. Critics questioned whether symbolism was being read too deeply. Yet, regardless of opinion, one reality became impossible to ignore. William's apparent stance had transformed the conversation. The debate was no longer about a portrait. It was about power, preparation, and the future direction of the crown itself. And while attention remained fixed on William's growing authority, another figure was quietly becoming impossible to overlook. Because every discussion about the future seemed to lead back to the same person, the woman whose prominence had increased with every passing year, and whose role in this unfolding story was about to become even more significant. Yet William's decision carried another consequence, one that placed Catherine at the very center of royal attention. As headlines spread, one detail stood above all others. Catherine had been elevated into a role few expected to arrive so soon. The Princess of Wales was no longer simply sharing the spotlight, she appeared to be becoming the spotlight. The conversation that had begun with a missing figure in a portrait was now transforming into something much larger. Every discussion about William's apparent decision seemed to circle back to Catherine. The more people analyzed the symbolism, the more one conclusion appeared impossible to avoid. Whether by design or by circumstance, the Princess of Wales had emerged as the central figure in a story that was rapidly redefining perceptions of the monarchy's future. And for supporters of the royal family, that development felt less like a surprise and more like the culmination of a journey that had been years in the making. Long before the portrait controversy erupted, Catherine had quietly been preparing for responsibilities that stretched far beyond ordinary royal duties. Unlike dramatic figures who sought attention through headlines and controversy, she built her reputation through patience, consistency, and discipline. Year after year, she embraced increasingly demanding roles while maintaining an image of stability that resonated with the public. There were no shortcuts, no sudden promotions, no overnight transformations. Instead, there was a gradual accumulation of trust that became one of her greatest strengths. By the time speculation surrounding the portrait emerged, many believed she had already proven herself worthy of far greater responsibilities. That trust was perhaps Catherine's most valuable asset. Periods when the monarchy faced uncertainty, public admiration for the Princess of Wales remained remarkably resilient. People viewed her as dependable, measured, and committed to duty. While others found themselves at the center of controversies and divisions, Catherine often appeared above the noise. This growing confidence from the public created something powerful. It created expectation. More and more people began seeing her not simply as a senior royal, but as an essential part of the monarchy's future survival. Every successful engagement strengthened that perception. Every challenge she navigated seemed to reinforce it. Her visibility during major royal events only accelerated that momentum. As the years passed, Catherine found herself representing the institution on increasingly significant occasions. What once seemed like preparation now appeared to be transformation. Each appearance carried greater weight. Each responsibility seemed to signal deeper trust from the palace itself. Royal observers frequently noted how naturally she stepped into roles that demanded leadership, diplomacy, and resilience. It was as though the future queen was slowly emerging before the public's eyes, one duty at a time. That future queen narrative became impossible to ignore once the portrait entered public discussion. For many insiders, Catherine's prominent position carried profound symbolic significance. Portraits are remembered because they preserve moments in history. They reveal priorities. They hint at future directions. In this case, supporters argued that Catherine's placement represented confidence in what was coming next. It suggested continuity. It suggested stability. Most importantly, it suggested that the institution was already looking beyond the present and preparing for a new era. Reports from palace circles indicated growing confidence in Catherine's ability to represent the crown at the highest level. Advisors reportedly valued her calm approach, her understanding of public expectations, and her ability to connect with people across different generations. Such qualities were becoming increasingly important as the monarchy adapted to changing times. While tradition remained central, relevance mattered too. Catherine appeared uniquely positioned to bridge both worlds, honoring the institution's past while helping guide its future. As her influence expanded, so did her presence within the broader machinery of royal operations. Observers noticed her increasing involvement in key initiatives, major discussions, and long-term planning. She was no longer simply participating in the monarchy's future. Many believed she was helping shape it. That realization thrilled supporters who saw her rise as proof that dedication and patience could still be rewarded within royal life. Yet not everyone viewed these developments with the same enthusiasm. Because every rise creates a shadow, and every shift in influence leaves someone else wondering what their own future might hold. While Catherine's growing prominence inspired admiration among many, whispers were already beginning to emerge from another corner of royal life, whispers that suggested this story was about to become far more complicated. But if Catherine's rise thrilled supporters, it reportedly created a very different reaction elsewhere within royal circles. Those closest to palace affairs claimed the portrait's release triggered immediate whispers. While no public statement was issued, observers noted a silence that seemed louder than any response could have been. As Catherine's growing prominence became the dominant story, attention inevitably shifted toward those who might have been affected by that rise. Within royal circles, silence is often interpreted as carefully as words. Statements can be managed, interviews can be prepared, public appearances can be planned. But silence, especially unexpected silence, has a way of fueling speculation unlike anything else. And according to those who followed the unfolding controversy closely, the days following the portrait's circulation were marked by exactly that kind of silence. Reports soon emerged, suggesting that many of Camilla's supporters were caught off guard by the growing narrative surrounding the portrait. For years, they had watched her navigate one of the most challenging journeys in modern royal history. Her path toward acceptance had not been easy. It required patience, persistence, and an extraordinary effort to establish her place within an institution deeply rooted in tradition. Over time, she secured a position that many once believed impossible. Yet now, some observers wondered whether the portrait controversy was signaling a subtle but meaningful shift away from that era. The concern was not necessarily about titles or official roles. It was about visibility. Within the monarchy, visibility often translates into influence. The figures most frequently associated with the future tend to command the greatest public attention. That reality led to growing questions among royal commentators. If Catherine was becoming the central symbol of the next generation, what would that mean for Camilla's public position moving forward? No clear answers emerged, but the questions themselves refused to disappear. What made those questions particularly sensitive was the effort that had gone into establishing Camilla's standing over the years. Her supporters frequently pointed to the challenges she had overcome and the gradual acceptance she had earned. From periods of intense public scrutiny to eventual recognition as queen, her journey had been defined by persistence. That history made the symbolism surrounding the portrait especially difficult for some to ignore. To them, it appeared as though years of progress were suddenly being viewed through a different lens. At the same time, broader concerns began surfacing about the palace's priorities. Many insiders reportedly believed the monarchy was entering a period of accelerated transition. The focus seemed increasingly directed toward the future rather than the present. As William and Catherine gained prominence, some wondered whether long-established royal dynamics were beginning to change. The institution had always evolved from one generation to the next, but transitions rarely occurred without tension. Every new chapter brings uncertainty, and uncertainty often creates anxiety among those whose influence was shaped by the chapter before it. This growing divide between what many described as the old royal era and the emerging new one became a major subject of discussion. On one side stood figures associated with continuity, tradition, and the current reign. On the other stood the next generation, carrying expectations for the future. The portrait seemed to sit directly at the intersection of those two worlds. Supporters of change viewed it as a natural progression. Others questioned whether the transition was happening more quickly than expected. Behind palace walls, speculation reportedly intensified. Some insiders suggested there were differing opinions about how the symbolism would be interpreted. Others believed the reaction had been underestimated from the beginning. Whatever the reality, the controversy continued growing because no definitive explanation ever arrived. In the absence of certainty, theories multiplied. Every detail was examined. Every gesture was scrutinized. Every silence became part of the story. Meanwhile, media commentators dedicated endless attention to what the portrait might represent. Some described it as a powerful signal about the future of the monarchy. Others dismissed the controversy as an overreaction. Yet even those skeptical of the speculation acknowledged one important fact. People were no longer discussing a portrait. They were discussing the future balance of influence inside the royal family itself. And as that conversation expanded, many began realizing that the portrait was not the cause of the change everyone was talking about. It may have been the trigger, but something much larger appeared to be unfolding beneath the surface. Something that extended far beyond a single image and reached into the very future of the institution. And as discussions intensified, many began connecting this moment to an even larger transformation taking place within the monarchy. Behind the portrait controversy, insiders pointed toward a broader plan. This wasn't merely about one image. It was about preparing the public for the next chapter of the crown, and the faces destined to lead it. As speculation continued spreading through royal circles, a new theory began gaining traction among commentators and palace observers alike. What if the portrait had never been intended as a statement about the present? What if its true purpose was to communicate something about the future? The more people examined the situation, the more they began viewing the controversy through a different lens. Rather than seeing it as an isolated decision, many started interpreting it as part of a much larger strategy, one focused on guiding the monarchy through a period of profound transition. For generations, the survival of the crown has depended on its ability to think beyond the immediate moment. Every reigning monarch understands that their responsibility is not simply to manage the present, but to prepare for what comes next. According to insiders, that principle may have been influencing decisions behind the scenes more than ever before. The monarchy was facing changing expectations, shifting public attitudes, and increasing scrutiny from every direction. Stability had become a precious commodity. In such an environment, long-term planning was not merely desirable, it was essential. At the heart of that planning stood William and Catherine. Over recent years, their partnership had evolved into one of the institution's most valuable assets. Together, they represented continuity, familiarity, and a vision of the monarchy that many people felt comfortable supporting. Their strength did not come from dramatic declarations or controversial decisions. It came from consistency. They projected unity during uncertain times and reliability during moments of pressure. As their influence expanded, so too did the perception that they were becoming the foundation upon which the monarchy's future would be built. That perception was not accidental. Royal institutions have always understood the importance of public confidence. While traditions remain central, public trust determines whether those traditions continue to thrive. Many observers believe the palace had become increasingly focused on managing how the future monarchy would be perceived. Every appearance, every initiative, and every carefully crafted message contributed to that effort. The portrait controversies, according to some analysts, fit perfectly within that broader objective. It reinforced a narrative that the next generation was ready, prepared, and capable of carrying the crown forward. The timing of these developments only added to the intrigue. Uncertainty often creates questions, and questions can create instability. During periods when public attention becomes fixed on succession, leadership, and the future direction of the monarchy, symbols take on extraordinary importance. A portrait may appear simple on the surface, but within royal life, symbols are powerful tools. They can reassure, they can inspire confidence. They can quietly guide public perception without a single official statement being released. That is why many insiders believed the portrait's symbolism was deliberate rather than accidental. At the same time, the transition toward the next generation appeared to be accelerating. William was assuming greater responsibilities. Catherine's visibility continued to rise. Discussions about the future became increasingly common. While no official handover was taking place, many people sensed that preparations for the monarchy's next chapter were already underway. The institution seemed determined to ensure continuity regardless of what challenges might emerge in the years ahead. Every strategic move appeared connected to that goal. This emphasis on continuity has always been one of the monarchy's greatest strengths. Governments change, political leaders come and go, public debates rise and fade. Yet the crown survives by presenting itself as a stable presence across generations. According to royal commentators, that philosophy may explain much of what was happening behind the scenes. The portrait was not simply about individuals. It was about reinforcing a sense of permanence during a time when uncertainty seemed to dominate public conversation. Yet for all the attention focused on palace strategy, one surprising reality soon emerged. The most passionate responses were not coming from advisors, courtiers, or royal insiders. They were coming from ordinary people who had begun forming their own conclusions about what the portrait meant. And as public interest exploded, the story was about to enter an entirely new phase. But the strongest reactions were not coming from inside the palace, they were coming from the public itself. Within hours, supporters and critics alike were dissecting every detail. Social media erupted, commentators weighed in, and royal observers debated whether they had just witnessed one of the most significant symbolic shifts in years. What had started as a quiet discussion inside royal circles suddenly exploded into a global conversation. The portrait was no longer being analyzed only by palace insiders or veteran royal correspondents. Ordinary people, longtime royal followers, critics of the institution, and casual observers all found themselves drawn into the debate. Everywhere the same questions were being asked. Was this merely a portrait? Or had the monarchy just delivered a subtle glimpse into its future? The speed at which the discussion spread surprised even experienced commentators. Within hours, every detail was being examined, interpreted, and debated with remarkable intensity. Much of the public reaction centered on Catherine herself. For years, she had cultivated a reputation built on patience, discipline, and service. Supporters viewed her elevation as both natural and deserved. To them, the portrait reflected years of preparation rather than a sudden promotion. They saw a future queen who had earned public trust through consistency rather than controversy. Across countless discussions, many expressed admiration for the way she had navigated the pressures of royal life while maintaining a steady image. For those supporters, the symbolism felt powerful. It seemed to confirm what they had believed for years, that Catherine was becoming one of the monarchy's most important figures. At the same time, royal followers passionately defended the idea that the institution needed strong and recognizable leadership as it moved toward the next generation. They argued that public confidence depended on clarity. The monarchy's future could not remain a mystery forever. In their view, highlighting William and Catherine was not about diminishing anyone else. It was about preparing the public for what was inevitably coming. The portrait, therefore, became more than an image. It became a symbol of continuity, a reassurance that the next chapter was already taking shape. Yet not everyone agreed. Commentators and analysts quickly found themselves divided. Some argued that observers were reading far too much into a single portrait. Others insisted that royal symbolism has always carried meaning, and that dismissing the controversy ignored centuries of tradition. Television panels, newspaper columns, podcasts, and online discussions became battlegrounds for competing interpretations. Every expert seemed to have a different theory. Some focused on succession, others focused on public relations. Many concentrated on the growing influence of William and Catherine. The result was a debate that only grew louder with each passing day. Social media amplified everything. Supporters celebrated what they viewed as a bold signal of confidence in the future. Critics questioned the assumptions being made. Memes, theories, analyses, and endless discussions flooded timelines. The portrait achieved something few royal images ever accomplish: it captured the public imagination. People who rarely followed royal affairs suddenly found themselves discussing palace strategy and succession symbolism. The conversation extended far beyond traditional royal audiences and entered mainstream public discourse. Many observers also began comparing the moment to previous royal transitions. Historical parallels appeared everywhere. Some pointed to moments when new generations gradually emerged from the shadow of those who came before them. Others recalled earlier periods when symbolism quietly revealed changing priorities within the institution. These comparisons added another layer of intrigue, because they suggested that what was happening now might not be unprecedented. It might simply be the latest chapter in a story that has repeated itself throughout royal history. As public interest intensified, scrutiny of palace decisions increased dramatically. Every appearance, every statement, and every absence suddenly carried greater significance. People searched for clues about what might happen next. Would there be another symbolic gesture? Another shift in representation? Another sign that the monarchy was accelerating its transition toward the future? The appetite for answers became enormous, and that anticipation created an atmosphere of suspense unlike anything the palace could have predicted. Because the more people discussed the portrait, the more they became convinced that it was connected to something bigger. A larger story seemed to be unfolding beneath the surface, one that had not yet fully revealed itself. Supporters, critics, and commentators all agreed on one thing: this conversation was far from over. Yet the biggest question remained unanswered. What would this moment mean for the monarchy's future? In royal history, some moments arrive with trumpets and ceremony. Others arrive quietly, hidden within a single decision. If insiders are correct, the portrait that removed one figure and elevated another may one day be remembered as the moment a new era truly began. As the debate surrounding the portrait continued to dominate royal conversations, many observers found themselves returning to a simple but powerful realization. The image itself was never the entire story. It was what the image appeared to represent that captured attention across the world. For weeks, discussions had focused on symbolism, influence, succession, and strategy. Yet when all the theories were stripped away, one central idea remained. The portrait had become a reflection of a monarchy standing at a crossroads between its past and its future. The lasting significance of the portrait may ultimately have little to do with who was removed or who was included. Instead, its importance lies in the questions it forced people to ask. What does the future of the crown look like? Who will carry its traditions into the next generation? Which figures will define the monarchy for decades to come? Those questions had existed long before the portrait emerged, but suddenly they felt more urgent, more immediate, more impossible to ignore. At the center of those questions stood Catherine. Over the course of this story, her rise had transformed from a gradual evolution into something that felt unmistakable. The Princess of Wales was no longer being discussed simply as a future queen in theory. Increasingly, she was being viewed as a future queen in preparation. Her years of dedication, her growing responsibilities, and the public trust she had cultivated all seemed to point toward the same destination. Supporters saw her as a symbol of stability. Critics questioned the growing attention surrounding her, yet both sides acknowledged one undeniable truth. Catherine's role within the monarchy was becoming larger than ever before. Alongside her rise came the increasing visibility of William's authority. Throughout this controversy, his presence hovered over nearly every discussion. Whether he directly influenced the portrait or not, many people interpreted the situation as evidence of his growing confidence and leadership. The future king no longer appeared to be waiting quietly in the background. He seemed to be stepping forward, gradually shaping the institution he would one day inherit. That perception alone carried enormous significance. It suggested that preparations for the monarchy's next chapter were already underway. At the same time, uncertainty continued surrounding Camilla's future influence. No official announcements had been made. No public confrontations had occurred. Yet the questions persisted. As William and Catherine became increasingly associated with the future, many wondered how other senior figures would fit into that evolving picture. The absence of clear answers only deepened the mystery. In royal life, uncertainty often creates more discussion than certainty ever could. What became increasingly clear, however, was that the monarchy itself was entering a period of transformation. Not a sudden revolution, not a dramatic break from tradition, something quieter and perhaps more powerful. A gradual shift in emphasis, a careful transfer of attention, a deliberate effort to ensure continuity while preparing for inevitable change. The portrait seemed to symbolize that process in a way few expected. That is why so many people viewed this moment through the lens of legacy. The monarchy has always been larger than any individual. Kings, queens, princes and princesses come and go, but the institution endures. Duty outlasts personal ambition. Service survives beyond individual reigns. The debate surrounding the portrait ultimately became a debate about those enduring principles. Who would carry them forward? Who would protect them? And how would the next generation leave its mark on history? Perhaps years from now, historians and royal observers will look back on this controversy and see it differently. Perhaps they will identify it as a symbolic turning point. Or perhaps they will view it as a moment when public attention simply revealed changes that had already been taking place behind the scenes. Either way, the portrait accomplished something extraordinary. It sparked a global conversation about the future of one of the world's most enduring institutions. And as that future slowly takes shape, one thing remains certain. The House of Windsor has always communicated through symbols, traditions, and carefully measured moments. Long after headlines fade and debates quiet down, the meaning people attach to those moments often becomes part of history itself. Because in the House of Windsor, the most powerful messages are often delivered without a single word being spoken. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.